Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm just gonna give a quick intro and then pass the mic over to Rosario to get us started. Oh, and apologies for my voice, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm sounding a little bit different than usual. Um, but anyway, my name's Laura Nash. I think I know several of you already. I'm a lab leader with People's Economy Lab. For those who are unfamiliar with us, People's Economy Lab is an organization led by and centering Black, Indigenous, and communities of color who are striving for economic justice. We convene community leaders, identify and workshop transformative ideas, and make the case for better economic models. We push the bounds of what's possible for a just transition to a solidarity economy in Washington state. In the solidarity economy movement, we often talk about resisting and building. To get to the economy and the world we want, we have to do two things simultaneously. We have to resist the culture and systems that are harming us, and we have to build a culture and systems that will support us. Today, we're excited to hear from Superfamilia because we see them putting this into practice in a very real way. They're resisting through their community defense efforts, teaching people how to defend community members from immigration and customs enforcement, and putting pressure on local governments to support immigrants in concrete ways. And at the same time, they've built networks of support to meet urgent community needs, including a food pantry, direct calls for financial support for families who need help paying bills or legal fees, and more. They're putting solidarity into action, and we'll have a lot to learn from them. So I'm very excited to welcome Rosario today. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining. I think that if you're joining today, it's probably because you want to take action and do something to support our communities that are being targeted. I do want to share that the skills that we are providing today, it's just guidance of what we have done, but I would say like use your creativity and meet with one another, learn from one another. And I think also for us, we have used these skills to protect our migrant communities, but it's important to acknowledge that we're not the only communities being targeted. These skills can be used for our disabled communities, trans communities, Black and Brown communities who continue to be targeted throughout the US history. I'll start by talking about our group Superfamilia, honoring our roots and honoring our ancestors. Superfamilia was founded by an unaccompanied minor. His name is Jose Ventura. Jose Ventura came to the US from El Salvador when he was 14 years old. He made the trip by himself, so he had to travel on his own. Jose, when he was in Mexico trying to cross to the US, he was kidnapped the first time and tortured by a cartel in Mexico, and then he was sent back to El Salvador. When he was hurt by them. But he wanted to reunify with his mother, so he attempted the trip a second time, and the second time he was able to make it. Jose experienced domestic violence from his mother, so he ended up living in the streets. And then through he was driving while intoxicated and was picked up by the police in Texas, and then from there he was sent to detention. From Texas he was sent to Pierce County, actually five, to a program for unaccompanied minors who are in removal proceedings. So he was transferred to Washington, and before he turned 18, he was able to get released in King County, but he didn't know anyone here. I think that his story is very powerful because he decided to create Superfamilia. And so he realized that his community is the one that was showing up for him. And even though he didn't have family here, his community was showing up as family, and they were the ones who were keeping him safe, helping him um, with financial things, or just even navigating, enrolling in school, or signing up for a gym membership. Um, Unfortunately, we did lose Jose to he was using drugs, and his drugs had fentanyl. But I think it's also just important that, our migrant communities often go through a lot of trauma when they're trying to come to the US. Um, and oftentimes we don't have healing services or culturally relevant support for our youth, and also just migrant families in general. But I think that the seeds that Jose planted in our communities of resistance, joy, healing, and really having a community that shows up for each other continue to show up in our work. So it's very important for us to honor him. So that's Jose. And this photo is during Day of the Dead ceremony. He helped us make our altar, community altar. About me, I'm undocumented. I came to the US at the age of 13, and I grew up in Durham, North Carolina. And so organizing in the South, when you're an undocumented migrant, is very different, looks very different from being in Seattle and organizing here. We faced constant collaboration with the police, with ICE. And so they have a program called 287G. And so basically, if the police scans your fingerprints, they send that to immigration. And when with this program, it really doesn't matter whether you remain silent or not. If you don't say anything, just by getting your fingerprints scanned, the police and immigration can actually check your immigration status. So I started organizing in Durham, North Carolina, and one of the first things that we did was a 14-day hunger strike, pushing for the DREAM Act. And then from there, we continue organizing. So this presentation is going to be very interactive. So I'm wondering, and now just taking it to Seattle and King County. I wonder if anyone wants to tell me what do you see in this photo?
See bicycles and some people with umbrellas in the back.
Yes, and so this photo is from last year. So last year, we realized that many of the kidnappings were happening at the Seattle Federal Building when our community was going to their immigration hearings. And so they will go, the immigration judge will dismiss their case. And for many folks, most of the folks who were kidnapped were in the process of applying for asylum, and they show up for their immigration hearing to continue that process, right? So they were doing everything, following the rules, and they show up for their immigration hearings and they get kidnapped. So I think what is amazing from the community's response, you see all these Lime bikes. When they realized that people were getting kidnapped, they blocked ICE from taking the community. And so using the limes, and folks were blocking on the other side. And I just, we were able to get some of the information of what was going on inside. We heard that some ICE officers were not able to leave the building, so they had to spend the night there. And, this is an example of how our community, if we stick together and we protest, just our First Amendment right, we can actually stop kidnappings. So after that protest, ICE hasn't kidnapped anyone from the federal building. What we have seen is that people are getting kidnapped on the streets while they're driving to work or to the store, and also other ICE check-ins in the USCIS building in Tacuila. Okay. Okay, so then I wonder if someone wants to share, what do you think when you see this image?
I think somebody took action. They didn't wait. That there's a saying that, you know, that during the Nazi occupation, that first they came for the socialists, and I said nothing. And then they did it for another group, and I said nothing until there was no one left to take. And this one says, take action. Don't wait.
Yes, and like I get goosebumps, right? Like I think of when we're reading history books and we think of like why did we allow this to happen? We see many many injustices happening nowadays and throughout the US history, we need to take action. So yes, someone decided to say, you know what, it's not okay for you to do this, so I will do something about it. And let's go. So when we, our migrant community, like I said, our group is, I didn't cover this. Super Familia, we're an undocumented led group, which makes it super difficult because, that's our community is being targeted, but we want to continue to use our voices to speak out against what's going on. And so one of the things that we started doing early last year, we started creating community defense spots. And so when we think, who do we call when we need help? And we always look through calling our family, neighbors, teachers, friends, and classmates. And so what I usually use as an example is I know that there's usually 1-800 numbers that have been, circulating in community. If you see ICE, call this 1-800 number. And I think that's completely okay. But I think that oftentimes that takes the responsibility away from local folks. So, if you see your neighbor getting kidnapped and he's only like 1 block away, you're the person who's going to get there faster to respond to that emergency. So really decentralizing our response and to not take the responsibility away of, I should do something about what's going on. So yes, you can call a 1-800 number to report the ICE sighting, but you should also, if it's, if you have the capacity to respond, we will ask that you respond or that you call on other neighbors or people that are close to the ICE sighting to respond. So what we did, we created community defense spots through with trusted folks. So that can be, like where in the area that you live or in the area that you work. And we created chats through Signal so that we can name our needs, right? So if we see, hey, I think ICE is outside my home, can someone who has legal status come and check? And so, there's like several ways that we ask for help. So going back, so sometimes we say, well, I'm worried that ICE is outside my home, or some folks who are in removal proceedings or are in the process of applying for asylum, they might be asking, hey, I have an ICE check-in. Can someone come with me? I have an immigration hearing and I'm afraid of getting kidnapped. So the ask can be, very wide, from something as simple as, can I get a ride to the grocery store? To, hey, I think ICE is outside my home, can you come and check? And I think it's important to acknowledge that everything is important. Every ask for help is important. We often get more attention or we get more responses when we say, hey, I think ICE is outside. But some things like having unaccompanied minors, unaccompanied youth who are not able to pay their cell phone, it's as important because if they're at risk of getting kidnapped by ICE, they need a phone to call for help. And so we really don't want to have a hierarchy of what needs are more important than the other, but also just like being able to respond to all types of help. And so if you want to create your community defense pod, maybe you can just start by writing 5 names of people you trust that you can count on who will be able to show up for you. And it doesn't have to be physically. I think that, disability justice is also important to acknowledge that there's folks who can be, like keeping track of, or like, hey, you can call, okay, let's say I'm going to call Laura. Hey, Laura, I am going to go see whether ICE is outside or not. Can you stay on the phone with me? And maybe I can provide you information about what I'm seeing so that I don't have to type it and I don't have to do 2 things while I'm driving. So you don't have to be physically there, but you can actually just help from your home. Everyone gets to play a role, responding for community. So I would say, think about people you trust who might be willing to start a community pod with you. We recommend using Signal. Sadly, there's lots of platforms that are pro ICE and pro police and pro FBI. Signal, it's not 100% safe, but it's one of the safest options that we have. So we recommend using Signal and checking your settings, having disappearing messages so that you don't have to worry about deleting chats or even like deleting chats frequently if you don't need a group anymore. And gather supplies. If you're going to be checking whether ICE is outside or in your community, you might need a megaphone, a whistle, radio, binoculars, a flash. Yeah, you might need different things. And as you're doing this, if you're responding, you might think of other tools that you need. But these are some of the ones that we thought of. And then also we think it's also very important for us to meet frequently in person, especially, if we're going to be responding to crises together. It's very important to build trust. And if there's communities that are being targeted, they might ask for something small at the beginning, like, hey, can you help me get groceries? But as things progress and if things get as bad as in Minnesota or LA, the ask might be, hey, I need you to take my children because ICE is outside. But it does progress of like trust building and relationship building. It takes sharing meals, it takes doing skill shares, and maybe even just having conversations. And then for step 5, we said assess your own risk, and that depends on like what are the risks that you're taking if you're responding to ICE. If you're a migrant community, if you're a migrant, that your risk might be higher. If you're a Black or brown person responding to ICE, your risk might be higher if you are a disabled person, if English is your second language. So just, assessing your risk and making a decision of how you want to show up for community, it's important. And we already covered this, but these are some of the things that we usually hear from community of when they need help. Okay, so I'm going to go to how do we confirm if there's ICE sighting, but I wanted to stop here and see if there's any questions about starting your own community defense pods or really like just connecting with your neighbors and community.
Oops.
Rosario, thank you so much for the information. I want to hear your take on the whistles because I've heard different things from different resources.
Whistles. Okay, so I am, like I said, I'm undocumented, so I think it really depends on who's wearing the whistle. And I think for us to ask, I think no organization or no one should decide for someone else. So what we usually do when we have whistles to distribute, we ask, right? We say, hey, like this is a whistle, it can help you, get, be loud and get attention and get support. But some folks might feel comfortable using it and others not. And I think, for me, it depends. I think I want to have it, but if I see eyes, I am not going to blow it because I don't want to bring attention towards myself. But I think there's instances where I will risk getting attention to myself. So let's say, I am undocumented. My parents are also undocumented. And so they're elders. So I worry that if they ever get picked up, they might not survive being in the detention center. So in a situation where if immigration messes with my family, especially like my parents, I will use the whistle, even though it's risky. So I would just say, it really depends on the person, on what what the person decides. And it's also like, let's say you're just driving by and if you see someone yelling for help, because I've seen that in several instances in Washington state, folks are like saying very loud, hey, please help me, help me. So that is an invitation to take action. Of course, if you approach them and they're like, no, please do not get close, like stay away. And you'll be able to tell from the body language if you don't speak Spanish or the language the person is, the migrant speaks, or the person who's being targeted. But I will say, like, I cannot decide for another person. And for me, that changes, right? Like I will use a whistle in some instances. But I've gone to the gas station and then I see an ICE officer like behind me and I just leave right away because I'm like, I do not want them to see me. I do not want to bring any attention to myself. So it really depends. And I think that's why, like the trust building and getting to know your neighbors, because everyone is going to have different opinions about different tools and skills.
Thank you for that complex response.
Yeah, and I also use like one day we were having conversations about the arresting. And so I was like, I hope that if I am ever in a situation where ICE is trying to kidnap me, that folks like try to de-arrest me. But then other folks were like, no, that seems too risky. I don't want that. So it's important to know where everyone stands. And that's also just important. Like if you're building relationships with your neighbors so you can respond when they're at risk of getting kidnapped, it's important to know what they want. And they might change their mind when it's happening too. Any other questions? Okay, let's okay, so we think it's very important for people to be able to have dialogues with community. I know there's the YSEAN hotline, but some of the feedback that our migrant community was trying to give them was that when they call and they ask, hey, we heard that ICE sits at the Winco store. And then they take the information, and then the person who made the report, they never hear back from them. And so we were like, hey, we're hearing from community that they would like to know whether, you were able to check or not. And so the response was, if we posted online, it was true. But if you don't see anything online, then there was nothing. And so what is important to consider is, if someone is trying to decide whether they will go to work or not, if someone is trying to decide whether they'll go to their doctor's appointment, they need to know whether ICE is outside or not, because they might just decide to stay home and not leave their homes. And if they continue to lose days of work, they can get fired, and that just creates a domino effect where things just continue to get worse. So we will say, like, if someone is reaching out to you and you have the capacity to go check, make sure you know, like you tell your neighbor, hey, I went outside and I checked and no one was there. But then they might still not feel safe and they might ask you for a ride. And that's what's important, to have your community defense spot, because if you don't have capacity to do that for them, then maybe you can ask someone else who might have capacity to do it. And so here we're using some photos of ICE activity. It's very difficult to tell whether it's ICE or not. I think they use different, they're using different uniforms. They're using things that say police so that you think it's the police and not ICE. And sometimes they pretend to be construction workers to be able to kidnap people. So here are some photos. And then we have how to respond. So we usually, for you to do that, so let's say, you know, Rosario calls you and I'm like, hey, can you please go check if ICE is at the Winco or like the Home Depot? So when you go, I'll describe the car. I can probably say like, oh yeah, I saw 2 silver trucks parked near the entrance. So you go and check, and it's difficult because most of the times, as you can tell in the photos, their windows are tinted. They look like a regular car. Some of them like even have like toys on the front, so that you, or like fuck ICE stickers. I think we heard like in Chicago, sometimes they're getting some like stickers so that you get confused. Anyway, one of the best ways to do is to approach them. So it's important for you to go with someone else or have someone on the phone. You can also just ask, hey, I'm concerned about what's going on. Like, can you please tell me who you are? Especially if it's like an apartment complex, you can say like, hey, or the neighbors are worried about what you're doing here. Can you please identify yourself? And sometimes they will, if it's ICE, most of the times they will just leave or not tell you. But if it's someone else, I think we had some instances where community calls and it was actually a private investigator. They were investigating a homicide in one of the instances. So then they provided their business card and case number for the family to call them and contact them whenever they were ready to talk to them. And then the other thing that you can do is you can check their license plates. And what we have been doing, it's using Carfax. And like I said, this is going to be interactive. So we'll go back to Salud in a minute. So with Carfax, if you have your phone, just go to the to this QR code, and I'll do it too to make sure that it's working. And so what you will see an option to check the history report. So you can search by license plate, and the license plate for this car is C as in cat. Oh, well, let's see. Are folks ready to check the license plate? Okay. C as in cat 23896C. And whenever you're ready, you can let me know what you got.
Mine's showing that there's 18 history records on this vehicle, and then it has options to buy the records.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, this one is interesting because it like sometimes it doesn't show. So what we got And we even took a screenshot. Usually what you get when it's ICE, you get this. The license plate and combination could not be found. But we have been using this car as an example, so we were like wondering, I wonder if our presentation got leaked. But anyway, this car is actually ICE. And this photo was taken in Burien. I don't know if you can tell the name of the street there. It's Unbound Boulevard, Southwest. So this was a kidnapping that happened 1 or 2 weeks ago. So very recently. And that is just one of the cars that they used. Let's do another one. I was ready for that one to work. Let's try this other one.
This one's showing what you showed with the screenshot. The license plate and state combo couldn't be found.
Okay, so yeah, so usually when it's ICE, you will not be able to find the information of the car. And if it's not ICE, you will be able to see, a report that you probably have to pay for it. But it's just a guidance. We do say like, please trust, like if you approach the car, if you take a photo, if you start checking the license plate and they leave right away, that probably means it was ICE. If they have their face covered, there's things that might tell you that it is ICE. And sadly, we are seeing that ICE ICE activity has been increasing, and mostly it's increasing in South King County. So yeah, so that's what you would use. And what we recommend is that when you're getting information, for you to use Salud. And if you forget this information, you can just look up Salud on the internet, and you'll be able to see what it means. But it's important to know the size, actions, what's going on, location. So if you get an intersection or exact address will be great, so that we can send more people to respond. The uniforms that they're wearing, time and date, and what equipment they have. This is like, it sounds very easy, to say like, oh, just gather this information. But if you're undocumented, because I usually see, like the cars, I do not stay to gather this information. I just leave and send a message. Hey, I think I saw ICE here. Can someone else go check? And someone else will gather Salud. If the person I'm asking for help doesn't know my legal status, they're just going to be like, why didn't you do Salud? So it's important to keep that in mind, because some of us are not able to gather all that information. But even when you have legal status, if you are following, these guys who have guns and masks and look very scary, it's difficult to gather this information while you're driving. So it's important to have someone else with you, or just have someone on the phone who can guide you on like, hey, can you tell me what intersection you see? And then just having someone guide you to gather the information and collect it feels a lot better than you having to do everything on your own. And that's why it's important to really, even if you're not leaving your home and wanting to put yourself on the streets, you can gather information for someone else who's going to check in person. So yes, Salud is important, but don't do everything on your own. Get help from other community members. So we have different cards here of ICE kidnappings that we were able to collect. And this is just to cover Salud again. And okay, so if it's ICE, we say follow up. And there's probably folks who are not leaving their homes, so let them know. if you have your community posts, let them know of like, hey, we saw ICE here so that we can inform community. And if it's not ICE, do let them know as well, because yeah, like we covered before, our community might be missing work. And so here's a video. I'm going to play this video about how someone in California responded, and a good example of how we can show up when ICE is around.
¿Que graba video o no? ¿Queda aquí? Okay.
Are folks able to hear?
You need to move, or you're gonna get arrested for impeding.
Yeah, it's a little quiet. I can hear.
Estamos anunciando que aquí está ICE. Este es un vehículo de ICE. Este es un vehículo de ICE. Tienen una van oscura, azul oscura, con placas que tienen para personas de disability y está chocado de un lado. Buenos días, Lindavista. Aquí estaba ICE. Nada más tengan mucho cuidado, estamos aquí para que sepan que ICE estaba en esta área. Ya se fueron, como siempre se van, les avisamos.
And so, you know, she sees the ICE officer, they start by saying, you need to move or you get arrested. But she uses her megaphone. It's, you know, we should be able to use our First Amendment right of protesting. So she starts protesting them, letting community know that ICE is out there, and you can see they leave right away. So this happened in California. Now, this other one, this is the recent kidnapping that happened in Burien. As you can see, for this one, there's really not a lot of community. I mean, there were like several folks, but the community was outnumbered. There were more ICE officers than community, so they took the person away. And so just
Why are y'all taking this person? Why are y'all taking this person?
Hey, over here.
Why are y'all taking this person?
so as you can tell, like there's way more ICE officers. There's only a few community members responding, and they got away with taking the person. But you know, like folks were there. Folks were able to talk to the person who was kidnapped, their co-workers, and get information and try to get support and resources to them. So even if you're not able to successfully stop the kidnapping, you can at least show up for support and make sure that the person is not being harmed or document what's going on. So it can look different ways. And then we'll cover also I know we're running low on time. We do have a comrade showing up in a few minutes from Superfamilia. So I think for this, I'll just summarize and just, you know, just reminding folks that supporting community can look in different ways. Our migrant communities are currently needing legal defense, financial support, and on-the-ground defense. So there's different types of support that we need, and all of it's very important. It's also just important to highlight that there's not really a way to get free legal services. And when we do call nonprofits that offer legal services, most of the time they have a wait list or they don't have capacity to take cases. From the hundreds of families that we have worked with, I've only met one person who got their case taken by a legal service provider. So that really translates to us having to fundraise from $5,000 to $20,000 for legal defense. And most community members end up representing themselves, which makes it super difficult for them to win their cases. But not only that, sometimes we have to pay for legal consults. We have to help pay for like preparing emergency packages for migrant communities so that they know what to create a plans for their children, if they get taken, who's going to keep custody of them. They have to have a plan for their pets, home, loans. We have also seen that folks might have, let's say they have a driving with a suspended license case. And when they get taken, they're not able to show up for their criminal cases. And so sometimes you have to call their attorneys to let them know what's going on. So there's a lot of support that is needed when someone gets kidnapped. And the way that we have been fundraising, from GoFundMe to Cefi, Venmo, Cash App, we have done things like having a drag show or having art classes where folks can pay and all of the money goes towards the family that was affected by the kidnapping. Same financial support. Folks are like, because when someone gets detained, they lose the income for that person. But sometimes we see that our community is not, it's missing days of work when there's ICE sightings. So that's putting them behind in paying the rent or getting food. So some of the asks are for food and getting help paying the rent. And I will say, if you want to support your community and you do not have the funds to do it, something that you can do is talk to your neighbors and say, hey, I'm going to have a donation box outside my apartment, or you can just drop off the donation. Sorry. You can just drop off a donation at my workplace. So there's creative ways of supporting. We do have a community pantry, and so we provide food to our migrant community at least once a month, every second Sunday of the month, and we just don't share much of that information online. But if you're connected with us in community, just like ask us for the information. We just don't want our community to get targeted by people who are anti-immigrant. So we keep the location safe. We don't share it online. And it's people just find out about our community pantry by word of mouth. We try to have fun. So if you see here our friend Nathan, he's one of the volunteers. He's dressed as a apple. Because we're like distributing apples and veggies, eggs and hygiene products. We also had a toy drive. Okay, so we are also, we have community demands. So what we're asking because we have seen responses from the Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson to King County Executive. They have had responses that are, they're attempting to keep us safe from ICE, but our community, has voiced that the responses that they have implemented are really not going to keep us safe. So, for example, King County Executive, they decided to ban ICE from entering private buildings that are owned by King County. And so it's important to know that most of our community members are getting kidnapped when they're driving, not really when they're inside a building. And one thing that they could do is ask the Department of Licensing to stop sharing information with ICE, or to stop flood cameras or any surveillance cameras that are being used by ICE to target our communities. The mayor of Seattle, she's putting up some signs in public places saying that immigration should not be, I don't remember the language. Basically, it's like immigration should not be kidnapping community in those public spaces. There's a specific language that they're using, but honestly, those signs, like, who's going to enforce them? And so what we're asking for, and these demands come from community, what we want to have guaranteed legal representation for people who are in removal proceedings, because that will really, increase the chances of them winning their cases and winning the fight to stay in the US. Getting support with food, having a community care fund. And the community care fund is important because we're being traumatized by everything that's happening. And so for us to be able to access care and healing, it's also important for our well-being. Applying state pressure. And when we ask, hey, why is the Department of Licensing sharing information with ICE? So from our mayor, Katie Wilson, to King County executives, King County officials, they could just call, they could call the governor and say, hey, why are you not holding the Department of Licensing accountable for what they're doing? No more surveillance, no evictions. When we learn about Know Your Rights, we always say, if ICE is knocking at your door, do not open your door. But, if our community starts losing their housing and they start living in cars and they do not have a place to go, there's really no door to close. So keeping housing is as important as having legal representation. We also ask that our community needs a safe space to voice their opinions and concerns. In the past, we have been able to take community members and migrant families to King County Council meetings, to Olympia, all these places so that they can voice their needs. But what we're seeing is that our community is afraid now, because when you go to do a public speaking or provide public comment, most of the times it's being recorded, or you need to provide your information, and our community doesn't feel safe doing that. So we're asking our elected officials to meet with them in private, and keeping the location safe so that no one knows where they are, and we don't increase the chances of having an ICE raid during the meeting. And in general, we just want ICE out of Washington, and we want to abolish ICE. So if you agree with this, and hopefully you do, we ask for you to take 2 minutes to support our demands. And this, if you scan the code, it should take you to an Action Network petition, and it will send an email to King County representatives and also to the King County executive. We also have, this is a second code. This is our Migrant Survival Fund. And, when we show up to kidnappings, we always, try to connect with family and ask them, like, what do you need? Do you need help with food? Do you need help with rent? And so we fundraise. We do both things. We fundraise individually, but most of the times, the individual fundraisers do not meet their goal. So we also have this community emergency fund, where people can donate, and then, let's say someone needed $1,000 for the rent, and they only got 800 by fundraising, then we're able to cover the 200 that they're missing. We do have several families that have been asking for help, and it has been difficult. A lot of the times we're like digging in our own pockets to support. So if we all contribute a little, it just makes things easier for everyone who's connected with affected families. Okay, and we do a lot more than, just protesting. Like I said, when we share our story about Jose and how we lost him, I think, investing in our healing and practicing our culture is what keeps us alive and keeps us with joy and makes us feel connected. But we don't have a lot of time to share about that. So I'll just keep. I'm going to skip that video. It's a video of us community members trying to tell the King County Council that we needed them to meet our demands, but they called the police on us. Once again, the police is being used to silence our community. So now I think I have 15 minutes. Do we have 15 minutes left? I want to call someone who's in Venezuela.
I think we were planning to end at 2:15, but if folks are able to stay on, I'm happy to stay
Okay.
on. I'm curious to hear from him.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Just a few minutes. So when we talk about the enforcement with ICE and how they're actually finding our community members, it does come from most of the time they're kidnapping people from when they're driving. And so we're going to call our friend Frank, who was organizing and continues to organize with us. He was kidnapped and deported to Venezuela. Let's see. And so let's see how this works. And if you have to go, it's completely fine. I'm sorry I took longer than what I was expecting. And so Frank, he was kidnapped when he was on his way to, oh, it's probably not going to work. Well, we'll probably have to skip that, but Frank was kidnapped when he was on his way to work, and when he asked ICE why they were stopping him, and they did tell him that they ran his license plate. The license plate was connected to one of his friends. And so Frank was on the process of applying for asylum, and he didn't actually have an immigration hearing until next year, November of next year. So ICE ran his license plate. They thought it was his friend who had already lost his case. So then they stopped him. And then Frank is like, oh, but I'm not this person that you're looking for. I am this other person. And I have been through the system. I have my immigration hearing next year, no, in 2 years, because that happened late in 2025. But Frank was deported, and he shared with us that, at the end of when he was on the process of getting sent back to Venezuela, he was moved to different places, to Arizona, to Texas, and most of the time he would stay in one bus with his hands and feet tied, without access to food, without access to water. And sometimes he will be put in small places with like up to 30 people. And so even using the restroom was super difficult because you had the restroom there. And so sometimes just having to use the restroom with so many people around you was super difficult for community. And we're very grateful that he's now safe back home, and that he continues to organize with us. He's wanting to share his story so that people know what community is going through. And through Mutual Aid, we were able to fundraise for him. He's now working on starting his barber business. And it's also just very important to acknowledge that when people get deported, they don't disappear. They continue to have needs. and continue to need support. And, community is showing up for Frank. And he's now able to start his barber business so that he doesn't have to struggle financially. So lots of appreciation to everyone who has donated to his fundraising efforts. But that's it. I don't know if there's any questions, but I think we're out of time. Sorry.
Thank you so much, Rosario. That was a great presentation. Some people have asked if you'd be willing to share slides so that they can share some of this information with their communities as well.
Yeah, I think I'll send it. I can remove the logo so that if folks want to, modify it to whatever works for them. But yes, I can send it to you and then maybe you can share with everyone.
And we'll share the recording as well. Any last questions before we close out? Good.
Thank
Lots of
you.
thank yous in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I wasn't expecting to take too long, but
A lot to share.
okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye. Talk to you later.
Bye.
You. Bye.